Hey guys, so we're just going to wait a couple of more minutes for everybody to join in. All right, I think we'll get started right now. Good morning, everybody. We are very, very excited to host this three-part webinar around customer experience today. And best of all, I have an amazing guest that I'd like to share with all of you today. But before we begin, a little bit of a history about myself. My name is Vivek Bhaskaran, and I'm the founder here at QuestionPro. I started QuestionPro back in 2005, so we've been at this for quite a while now. And we've evolved from a simplistic survey tool, that's how I started it off, and then into three different platforms that we run today. One, it's market research and consumer insights, where we help our customers understand what's coming in the future. The second part to our business is customer experience, where companies use our platform to actually measure touch points and understand the interactions between their customers and them on a granular level. And then the third piece of our business is employee engagement, where our customers are understanding what keeping a pulse on their employees, which is frankly all of our most valuable assets. So the three different components of our platform over here at QuestionPro. But let's dive into it. So today we're going to talk about customer experience, and I'm extremely happy to introduce David Hicks over here. He and I have gotten to know each other over the last few months, and David runs a company called TribeCX, and he's putting together an amazing group of practitioners and very, very practical tools in the customer experience space. We hear a lot of talk about customer experience and kind of the need of the hour, but what TribeCX does very effectively is give practitioners a practical toolkit on the different components of customer experience. Before we get started, a quick bit of trivia over here. David actually has been a customer of ours, of QuestionPro, for over the last 6 years, even in his previous life at Mulberry Consulting. So I'm very, very excited to have David here. Welcome to the party, David. It's been a while. I know you and I have talked quite a bit. So welcome to the party over here, David. How are you doing today?
Good, Vivek. Thank you for the invite, and thanks for the team there at lining up such a professional event. So glad to be talking to you guys about customer experience capabilities, in particular metrics for employees and the customers.
Awesome. So I'm gonna pass the baton back to you, David. So I know you've done this a couple of times, so kind of let's go through this and teach us a little bit over here.
Well, let me start off by giving a bit of context about myself. Picture this, if you would. Hard though it is to believe, I'm actually over 50, Vivek, and I started my working life in my 20s. I worked for a food delivery company in the UK called Unigate, delivering milk in glass bottles to doorsteps. I mean, most of the listeners wouldn't even have been born when that sort of thing was happening, but I did very well there. I started my life there actually delivering milk and became a manager and the leader of the business. And we wanted to get a handle on how well our customers were being served by our staff. So I used to put into the rounds book, the actual book that guys kept their records in, a number of postcards for them to put into the doors of their customers to say, how are we doing? We'd love to hear from you. And there were 10 of those put across the rounds book, and over a year we'd actually ask all of the customers on a guy's milk round, how are they doing? And then over time I got to realise that, it'd be really neat to hear what the staff thought of their bosses. So we actually put into their pay packets once every month, how are we doing? Not pointing the finger particularly at the leader, but asking folks, how are we doing? And you know something? That was really, really useful. But that was 30 years ago. That was paper.
David, that's CX 101. I mean, you did it the old school way, but you did it the fundamental mechanics are still there, right?
It is, but the bit that was really powerful, and it was a stupid oversight on my part. What was incredibly useful was when these postcards came back to the office, I'd actually put them in little piles and I'd go through them and then sort of check them and summarize them. And a roundsman came in one day and he said, "Oh, I'd love to hear what my customers were saying about me." And I thought, why the hell don't we sit down and just talk through this so we can improve things? So we actually connected the employee and the customer side of the equation. And that was invaluable, and the business performed brilliantly, certainly better than the competition, in part because of that. And over the 30-odd years now that I've been doing this, I've become, well, frankly, humbly learning every time I've touched customers, either in a line role myself. I used to lead marketing and strategy in the Royal Mail business in the UK. I'm now based over in the US as well, where I'm working with a fantastic group of people in the Tribe business. Previously, as you quite rightly say, I led the Mulberry business. Fantastic group of people in both businesses, very strong practitioners. And frankly, what you've got to do is to help organizations to do this for themselves, actually build these capabilities deep into their business so that they've got those insights and they're motivated to use them. And there's the governance to actually prioritize resources around the employees' feedback and around the customers' feedback, Vivek. So been at this for a while, but the bottom line is you've got to capture this data, assimilate this data, share this data, and above all, use this data. But more on that later.
Got it.
In terms of customer experience, to your credit, you followed the market at QuestionPro. I remember using you guys as a simple survey tool, one of the more sophisticated ones, which we needed some bells and whistles in the Mulberry days. So QuestionPro was great there, and the advice that you give, as well as a fantastically flexible platform, we use that in Mulberry. And over the years, we've worked with some fantastic companies, and at Emirates, we were asked by the leadership team there, so what is customer experience? Let's define customer experience. Well, customer experience is about both the rational side of what you do and the emotional side of what you do, the how and the what of what you do. If you just focus on the how, the what you do, then you'll end up being a commodity player. If there's no attempt to get a handle on the how you do it, how you make me feel, then you'll be a commodity player, which is fine if that's what you want. But if you want any sort of premium out of this, then you'll need to get the two ends of that equation right. And the other piece of bad news for practitioners that are listening is this. Great experience, it just does not happen by accident. We've been privileged to work with the UPS team as well. Very strong engineering focus in that business. And it's there that I learned that, great experience does not happen by accident. It's purposefully engineered. A great experience is the outcome of you persistently and consistently delivering purposefully designed experience. It doesn't happen by accident. But Vivek, when you do get it right, look at this chart. This is a chart that's been running there for a number of years. Forrester collect data from customer experience practitioners, and they rank those organizations that do a great job in customer experience. And then they ask a business called Watermark Consulting. I think it's been running for 3 or 4 years. How do those organizations perform? And look at this. Look at the extent to which those that are leading customer experience providers, how they outperform the laggards there. Yeah, I mean, it's a real lift. If you wanted one chart to convince your colleagues that we should be focusing on customer experience, this is the chart, because it shows the potential improvements in performance. But it would be tragic if all that folks saw was this slide. And you pick behind that data and you actually look at why. The reason that organizations that deliver great experience perform better is for 2 reasons. Great experience is actually more efficient. If you deliver this right, you have fewer calls complaining, you have fewer issues with customers. It's more efficient to deliver a great experience. Plus, customers and employees love it. So you get the customer and the employee effectiveness benefits as well. People don't churn, staff don't leave. You get those 2 pieces together. That's what drives this improvement in business performance. Does that strike you as true in your experience of it?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I do want to share one thing. I mean, you touched a little bit on Emirates, and I have like an interesting story around Emirates also. Emirates actually happens to be their market research division uses QuestionPro also, and I was talking to one of the leaders there, and one of the things that Emirates did very recently in their explosive growth, actually, The Economist had this great article around how Emirates has grown from in total miles flown, passenger miles flown. They were number 16 in 2011, and within 3 years they were number 3 in the global market. And one of the very interesting stories that I heard about, Emirates introduced this concept of, for their business class passengers, they introduced the concept of chauffeur driven cars. So they come and pick you up and then they drop you. And if you think about it from an experience perspective, they are the first guys to actually start thinking, and they did some research in this to understand where does the journey begin and where does the journey end.
Yep.
And most airlines think that their journey begins when you walk into the airport. And we've all flown, you and I have flown everywhere, and everybody thinks that the general concept is that, hey, when I come into the check-in counter, that's when your interaction with the airline is. Well, that's not true. We start thinking about the journey when we leave the house, not necessarily we go to the airport. And this inversion of thought is what led Emirates to think about saying that, hey, look, you know what? What's one of the most apprehensive things people do is like, oh, I'm going to go to a different country, and Emirates typically obviously flies international, and I need to pick a cab somewhere in Bombay or somewhere in Manila, and then go to the hotel, and it's always little apprehensive, or I need to go from my house to the airport on time, and so on and so forth. So they solve that problem by totally understanding the experience and kind of mapping that experience, and then saying like, well, the experience doesn't start when we think it starts, it's when the customer think it starts. And that is very, very important. And going back to your point about this is why they're outperforming, and look at the metrics around Emirates. I mean, the total miles flown is just phenomenal. And I think they're it's kind of the metrics around them beating out the Southeast Asian airlines is just it has been very well documented, and this is kind of these two kind of things just go along very well together.
And if participants want to see how Emirates did that, that's going to be featured in event number 2 when we look at customer journey mapping. One of the founders of the Tribe business is Craig Lee, who led that transformation in customer experience at Emirates, and we're going to be using Emirates material when we get to customer mapping session number 2 in these 3. But what you see here graphically is what that looks like in organizations. Organizations tend to maybe start to look at customer metrics. They start to maybe get satisfaction metrics in place. They maybe start to look at customer experience, and they hammer down some of the irritants. They fix those bugs. They might have functional focus on particular issues. And this was some work done by Bain and Forrester last year. We pulled the 2 bits of work together to create this chart. It shows that over time, you can actually move an organization up that bottom line. If anything, it starts to sort of curve off after a while. What you've done is effectively drained the lake of customer experience irritants. And what you need to do to kick up that curve is you need to build the muscle mass, the cross-business muscle mass. You need to have employee metrics in place. You need to understand how these things actually fit together across the organization. So those cross-business capabilities and the metrics to support them, they're fundamental in being able to kick up that curve and actually start to deliver great experience in the organization. But I worry for those that are listening, they're thinking, crikey, metrics and mapping and all this sort of stuff. Well, the reality is you need to align everything in the organization behind the experience if you're going to be as good as Emirates. But Emirates started in one place. They started their whole journey in their Skywards Flyer, premium Skywards Flyer area. That's where they did their first bit of work on customer experience, because I was there. And it took them 10 years to actually build what they've got now. But the reality is they started to learn. And that's my counsel to anybody that's in the customer experience practitioner or considering customer experience as a discipline in their business. Wherever you are, just start. Start to build that internal proof point, that internal muscle mass that shows the benefits of taking a customer lens. And in time, you'll get the strategy and the vision and the culture, the design of the experience right, the feedback right. But start to actually improve the customer experience and improve in your business, so you can show organizations what it is that customer experience can do for your business. And Vivek, when we've asked those organizations that have done a good job of delivering customer experience, when you ask leaders, so what is it that you put in place to actually deliver a great experience? Three things seem to surface in organizations that have done a great job. They've got their metrics in place. It's like the cornerstone of this. They've actually mapped their experience, and they've started to benchmark and use that to convince colleagues to improve the experience. So these three events are actually going to be focusing in these key areas. But we're going to look, if I may, at metrics first in the business. But just to reassure colleagues, if you need evidence, you need to sort of equip yourself with the ideas, responses, the detail that you need to convince your colleagues. You're not alone now. This discipline's developed over the last 5 or 10 years, and there are some great pieces here. So if you email back QuestionPro, we gladly point you towards some of these great publications that are actually in place that will help you to get up that curve and to equip you with the information that you need, or ping TribeCX. We'll gladly send you these details so that you've got the evidence that you need. What customer metrics is effectively try and help you to do is to build an outside-in view of your organization. And Vivek, you've now actually set up a separate part of your business to focus on customer metrics per se. That's become such a key part of what people are asking you for.
Absolutely. I mean, so if you think about it, I mean, it goes back to the old adage, right? Like, you only improve what you measure, which is, Peter Drucker's kind of famous quote in management theory, and we all kind of agree to the fact that the customer experience is one of the kind of the defining factors of certain companies. And how do you, like you said, how do you kind of improve that? And the first part of improving anything is measurement. And measurement around metrics. And so what happened was, from our perspective at least, a lot of our customers were using, obviously surveys for kind of measuring touch points. But that kind of, like you said, like you correctly pointed out, in the last 5 to 8 years, that piece of the business has grown exponentially, where it's not just measurement of overall satisfaction, but different components and different touch points. It's not, and each of these touch points, people are looking for different things. For example, when people are calling into the customer call center or some support center, they're looking for resolution. When they're looking to buy something, they're looking for inspiration. So what you're looking for either within a journey, as customers can interact with companies, is different. So more evolved companies are measuring different touch points differently. And so the first thing that we obviously kind of recommend is start off somewhere, but start off with measurement, and which is what you're alluding to over here with metrics, and that gives everybody kind of like, hey, how are we doing, just to set up the baseline and set up the benchmark for the baseline, if you will.
And metrics is incredibly valuable, but it's not enough. And there's some superb work that Gartner did looking at people collecting metrics. Look at the tragedy here, Vivek. You've got people that are collecting metrics, but actually doing nothing with it. I mean, you've got such wonderful tools in the shape of QuestionPro and some other VOC providers. But the truth is, unless you use that data, unless you use it to respond to the issues, unless you use it to actually get employees to share and use that insight to improve what it is they do, I mean, heaven forbid you actually tell customers, do you know what, we heard you. I mean, one of the best examples of this is a guy called Josh Bottomley, who was the chief exec of the LexisNexis business in the UK. Josh kicked off a program, it must be 8 or more years ago now, when he was leading that business. And he polled 1/12 of his customers every month. He got that information back. He asked them, would you recommend us and why? And he summarized that data, and the leadership team sat down. Immediately that data was available, and they decided, these are the things we're going to fix in the next month. And do you know what he did, Vivek? He then emailed the entire customer base and said, thank you to those that completed the survey. We heard you. We're going to fix this now, fix this next, fix this later. You should start to see improvements next time we ask. And every month, he wrote the same type of note to people, advising them the thing that they were going to focus on. And rather than the number of participants diminish, the number of participants went up month by month, because people could see the business was listening. And do you know what? The blooming leadership team were really focused on fixing that thing because it had gone public. So collecting data isn't enough. You've actually got to use it, show that you're using it, be serious about this, and share it with the employees, the people that are actually delivering this stuff. Does that ring true for you?
Absolutely. And so I think that's the key part you asked earlier on, is why we kind of, why we are building out an entire customer experience platform. And that's what is the key differentiator over here between just a data collection tool and a customer experience platform. In our vision, we also believe that, getting the data back, not just collecting the data, but getting the data back in real time to the right folks is how we can change behavior, frankly. So, and that includes both customers as well as line level employees. I want to share another quick story over here. I was talking to I was in India, and I was talking to one of the chefs. He came out and he was telling us about the program that they've put in play, where in real time he has a mobile app where he can view all customer comments in real time, and he's actively looking at it in real time all the time, and he's almost addicted to it in terms of feedback. And this is just a chef in a hotel, really, right? So I think the key over here is like, okay, we can definitely, the technology is there to collect all kinds of transactional data, all kinds of behavioral data in real time, and even do analysis on it in real time and produce reports that go to the boardroom. However, if you cannot get that data back in the hands of the actual employees that touch customers, the chefs, the waiters, the people who are actually on the ground, if you can't get that data back to them, then I think this whole customer experience modeling doesn't really work, because they are the guys who are actually empowered, that we've hired, we've entrusted them to kind of shape the behavior and shape the experience. So so I think that's why, going back to your point earlier on, is like, why have we evolved into a customer experience platform? One of the markets that we are actively chasing after is because just collecting the data is not gonna do it. Collecting the data and sharing the data with the right folks at the right times.
Indeed. And we mentioned Net Promoter a few times. I mean, Reicheld's work on this is frankly brilliant. If you ignore the sort of link to business performance, because there's been quite a lot of contention around that. About 10 years ago, Fred Reicheld from Bain, from Satmetrics, he put together a mechanism that suggested it was possible to get a handle on what your customers were thinking and feeling about a business by asking them, would you recommend us to a friend or colleague? If you then gave them a 0 to 10 point scale, and that gave you a chance to actually separate your customers into sort of 3 groups. Those that scored 1 to 6 were the folks that really didn't like you, 7s and 8s were the folks who were undecided, the 9s and 10s were your promoters. And if you subtracted your detractors from your promoters, what that provided you was a net promoter score. And it allowed you over time, if you kept on doing this, you could see if that score was moving up, moving down. And if it was moving up, Fred's work suggested that you'd actually have a predictive measure you would expect for business performance to improve. If it's cranking down, the net promoter score, that would be predictive of your business performance trending down. Now, leave that point aside. That's an area of some contention, that link to business performance. Some organizations spend a lot of time actually building that link for their business, and good luck to them. What's invaluable is the second part of this question, which is, if you ask those folks why, what is it that we've done that's led you to score in that way, then what you're able to do is to see, for those promoters, what is it we're doing that they love, so we can actually do more of that and not screw it up. And those folks who are detractors, what is it that we're actually doing that's causing you to be a detractor, so you can get on the case and fix that. And do you know what? That's invaluable. If you can pull that information and share it, not just with your chef colleague, Vivek, but with operations leaders, it allows you to prioritize investment decisions and resources, to zero in on those things that are going to make a difference. But the really powerful thing is, if you've got customers who are saying, do you know what, we really love you, then there's a group of people, and there's a load of research around this, they actually want to recommend, they wanted an engagement with your business. They actually want to be part of your business. So if you start to engage those promoters, whether they're wherever they are in the world, engage them, start to give them an opportunity to contribute to the business. Simple things. Maybe giving them advance notice of a new launch, or giving them, ask them what do you think of these new products that are coming up the line. Engaging those folks, it actually improves their stickiness around promoters. So you're banking that promoter score by engaging them. So it's a powerful, powerful tool. It's invaluable. It works exactly in the same way with employees. So you have an employee promoter score as well. So you can actually see when you ask your employees, how are we doing? Would you recommend this business to a friend or colleague? It's a powerful measure, and it's probably what's driven this discipline furthest and hardest since Reichel published his initial work in this area. If you want details around that, we've actually got some of the original HBR papers that Fred published. So again, drop QuestionPro or ourselves a note, and we'd gladly share some of that information with you. But that's Net Promoter. Two halves: the number and the why. Critical things to get out. Vivek, any points on that before we move on to another measure?
No, I think NPS has been the kind of, frankly, the gold standard. But I think you bring up a very important point around. We see a lot of customers when we start talking to them, is they set up the NPS score, but they don't set up the secondary component of it. Is why would you do that? And we've seen, and I think that is, and we are also kind of innovating over there in terms of not only kind of doing root cause analysis and kind of automatically figuring out based on the open-ended comments as to what are the key themes that come out of the system. So those are kind of interesting ideas. I think Fred obviously published the NPS, but the why component is a very critical component that we see a lot of our customers miss out, and I think that can help drive some of the kind of very important decisions that you can do right after you realize, okay, this is our scores. Okay, no, what can we do about it? And the answer is usually typically there if you look at the comments, and you can do some root cause analysis through those models.
But one of the things that Net Promoter struggles with is there are some quite significant differences in the cultural readiness of people to actually recommend anybody. In some parts of the world, I'm thinking around the Middle East and around the Mediterranean, if I'm going to recommend you to a friend of mine, then that's a really, really big deal. So it's quite hard to get sort of high scores. Here in the US, where I'm speaking from today, do you know what? People love you within 10 minutes of meeting you. So it's quite easy to get higher scores. So that cultural bias does seem to get away in the way of some uses of Net Promoter. It's the trend that's important. It's a trend month by month, quarter by quarter that's key. But a way of maybe breaking through some of that cultural bias is a different approach to the metrics development. Customer effort score is a very similar dynamic, but it actually uses the how easy was it to do business with us. So rather than the Net Promoter score, what comes out of it is a net easy score. You ask, how easy was it to do business with us today? How easy was it to get the help you wanted today? You invite people to rank you. Again, you ask the question, why? And you pull that data back into the business as a trend, showing your folks that really love you, showing those folks that really don't love you. But I say there's the same risks. Be very, very careful with playing this information back to the business. You've got to instill on your senior leadership, this is a metric, it's the trend that's key, the absolute number. I mean, I go into organizations, Vivek, and they say, oh, we've got a Net Promoter of 20 or 30 or minus 15 or whatever. And I'm saying, go on, why on earth is that in any way relevant or important? And they look at me a bit puzzled to say, well, we spent a while getting to that. Well, tell me about that journey. Where did it go from? That's the key. How was it that you actually improved that Net Promoter score? The absolute value matters not a thing. What's important is to actually move that number, move the proportion of promoters relative to detractors. That's what's really key in this. And it's even worse with senior leadership. So the same organization, LexisNexis, a charming guy who's now long since retired, Andy Prosis, who was leading that business. Josh did this work in London. It was superb work. This was 10 or so years ago. And he gave it to Josh. Josh gave it to Andy and said, we should use this across the business. And to their credit, they did. They deployed Net Promoter across the business. But I was insistent with Andy. I said, Andy, be very, very careful. It's not the number, it's the trend that's key. And Andy really struggled with that. He was trying to compare organizations' scores with other organizations' scores rather than the trend with organizations. And putting that into the hands of senior leadership, sometimes they attach bonuses to it and those sorts of things. It's really, really dangerous. Powerful, but dangerous. And it reminds me of my wonderful son. I had my 50th birthday, and we went to Miami together for a weekend, and we went to this shooting range where for $50 you could actually have some of the most powerful weapons known to man, and you could fire them down a shooting range. And imagine this, a complete novice with a whopping great firearm shooting it down the range. So a powerful, powerful tool in the hands of a complete novice, extremely dangerous. The same is true of these tools. Don't put them into the hands of your colleagues unless they understand the potential and the limitations and the risks associated with it, or you're effectively giving them a really powerful weapon that ends up damaging the organization more than it actually fixes it. Does that ring true at all to you, Vivek, in terms of your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think we say the same thing. I mean, in terms of the absolute, that's why, the absolute numbers don't matter. It's the relative numbers. It's the month over month, the quarter over quarter by segment that really, really matters. And I think I couldn't agree more, because the absolute numbers, companies go through changes. You can't really compare one company to the other, but there are structural changes in one business versus another one, and they're going through some transformation, so there's no point comparing. But as you're going through the transformation, you can compare against yourself. So if you can't compare against yourself, then there's something wrong. And going back to, again, why are we kind of expanding our portfolio of tools is for, allowing our customers to do some of those longitudinal benchmarks, longitudinal trends around saying like, okay, this is how this group did last quarter, and this is how your group is doing this quarter. And it's the spread between what you did last quarter and this quarter that frankly matters. Everything else is like, okay, you can kind of compare and do the benchmarking, produce, compare against all the other retailers and compare against all of that, but that's not actionable. What is actionable is you're comparing against yourself, and you know what your group was doing last quarter, and you know what you're doing this quarter, and you should, if it is directly impacting customers, then you should see an uptake, or if it's not, then you see a downtake. Simple. And I think, and that spread is the most important, is the most important metric that I would argue for.
As we head down to the end of the presentation, a sneak peek, we're going to be looking at the next session on benchmarking and the last session, on mapping, the last session on benchmarking, and a sneak peek on that. If you'd like to get a quick look at how effective your sort of metrics capabilities are relative to others, you can go to the TribeCX site. Bottom left, you'll see the link to the benchmarking tool there, and you can see for yourself how those capabilities actually compare to others. And that sometimes is helpful in terms of getting your colleagues into action on customer metrics. But if you are going to do it, make sure it's being used. If you are going to do it, make sure that you're putting equal emphasis on employees and on customers. But Vivek, to your credit, those customer experience tools that you've got are invaluable in actually making those things, those insights, easily accessible. And from a customer's point of view, you mentioned Emirates. I mean, the whole thing, the limo, the in-flight, the luggage, to your destination. It only works, they found, when it all works, yeah? So customer metrics, employee metrics through the end-to-end journey, we're going to cover that next time. That's fundamental, that's key. And putting equal emphasis on your employees and your customers. I read a paper recently on this saying that you really shouldn't be doing everything you do for your customers, you should be doing for your employees. It's invaluable. And that was a lesson, as I said, I learned 30 years ago with Ken on round 4 in Swindon branch when he came into my office and said, I'd love to see what my customers are saying about me. That's actually stuck with me for 30 odd years. Employee and customer feedback, that's the breakfast of champions. Get that into the hands of people in the organization, and you can really fly. You can really, really fly. Vivek, back to you.
Thank you so much, David. We thoroughly appreciate your time, and we enjoyed the presentation. And we, like we said earlier, we're doing a 3-part series. The first part is around measurement, and the second part is around benchmarking, and then no, the second part, sorry, is around journey mapping, and the third part is around benchmarking. So these three components are critical to any customer experience program. That are kind of the foundation of any customer experience program. And today, hopefully, everybody got kind of a glimpse into what the metrics, what the metrics are. So we will next. In about a month's time, we'll have another webinar around this, and we'll email all of you guys about the second webinar and the third webinar of the three-part series. Till next time, thank you very much.